Radio Spaetkauf. Berlin news in English.
It's Thursday, March 6th, 2025. This is Radio Spaetkauf, Berlin's news podcast, recording live at Another Country Bookstore in front of a wonderful audience. I'm Izzy Choksey.
I'm Dan Stern.
And today we have two wonderful guest co-hosts. First, Pip Roper, friend of the pod and co-host of the History Flakes podcast.
Yes, hi. Thank you.
Another new co-host, a good friend of mine, someone who I've been doing stand-up with for over a decade, I think. Like, not always, he's a colleague from my other job. Please welcome to the stage, Mr. Toby Arsalan.
So, the weather is finally turning. No, it's finally getting warm again. People are starting to get on the streets. People are starting to get food and sit on patches of grass next to patches of mud, next to cigarette butts. So that's happening. How's everyone else feeling?
Pretty good about that.
Yeah. It's a little unsettling when you walk out with winter gear and then you're just like, why am I hot all of a sudden? I don't know that feeling anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the sun is shining and the vitamin D is getting generated in your body and suddenly endorphins are running into your brain.
Yeah.
I sound manic, but things are good.
I feel like it's like breakup season. I feel like I've seen a lot of couples in Berlin where one of them's crying, but they look like they knew it was coming. I don't know if anyone's noticed this, in October or September when you start to see people being like, "You'll do," just on the U-Bahn, yeah, your place, my place, whatever, as long as it's not alone. But now I'm sort of feeling like there's this opposite thing where all of a sudden, everyone goes outside and they're like, "Oh, my winter clothes are no longer appropriate. What would be appropriate? I guess just my underwear." And then they just go out in search of new love. But maybe I'm projecting. I don't know. That's also popular. That's also possible. I want to make an announcement too. Starting today, although today when you're listening to this, not today if you're in the audience, we've got something special. We're doing a Kickstarter. We're doing a Kickstarter because I decided it was really important that we take our hit miniseries, How to Fuck Up an Airport, and release it on vinyl. So you don't see a lot, a lot of people are talking about podcasts pivoting to video. Not a lot of people are talking about pivoting to vinyl, except for Radio Spaetkauf. So there'll be a link to the Kickstarter, and basically we just need to get enough people into it that we can pay to print 100 copies of a 4-disc set with a multifold cover. Yep. And I think that early bird is $75. And we just need to get a few people on board. The link will be in the bio. I mean, who doesn't want their favorite podcast on vinyl? Or maybe who doesn't not want it? The point is, it'll be available as soon as this podcast is up.
So, coming up on today's show, we are going to hear about how the A100 is coming for your favorite clubs and hell-bent on destroying part of Friedrichshain. We will do a deep dive into how the federal election on the 23rd of February went down in Berlin, i.e. Berlin very much got the fucking memo, and we discuss the potential of using progressive law to solve the housing crisis in Berlin. But first, here is some short news. So, Germany is doing some more digital stuff. Guys, the federal government is implementing a long-planned policy.
Were you trying to do a double entendre there?
No.
Okay.
I don't do sexual double entendre, but yeah, now I see it. Now I see it written in front of me. Anyway, the federal government is implementing a long-planned policy of having electronic patient records available for all patients in the German health system. The elektronische Patientenakte, EPA, will start its rollout in Berlin in April. The idea is to give doctors, hospitals and pharmacies access to digital patient records. 3 pilot regions have been testing EPA, and I guess without any hiccups. But careful, Deutschland. Next, they'll be coming for your cash-based payment system. She looks at the audience, ready for someone to say, they already are!
I have to say, I get why this is better. Like we already have the thing where like your prescription goes on to your card, and that seems magical. Although I kind of miss having the paper one because that was the reason I knew that I was supposed to go pick up the prescription, and my card doesn't just sit in my wallet being like, dude. This only lasts 5 days. That being said, I also recently got my test results from a urologist because I happened to bump into him on the street, and otherwise, would have had no idea that I had a healthy bladder. So I was just going around being like, I guess they'll talk to my doctor. Do I go back? Do I call? Like what? And then he was just like, hey, congratulations. And I was like, who are you? He's like, I'm your doctor. So but my real concern is like, at least when I had like a folder full of papers and faxes, I had those records and knew what they were. And now it's just the same incompetent people losing digital files. Yeah. Not incompetent, well-meaning. Everyone makes mistakes. So I don't know. I feel like maybe can't we just have both? Like
you can object to it.
I don't want to. Oh, that's true. I can opt out.
You can object to it. You can opt out, especially if you have kids and you don't want everything they've ever had on record in case they want to get private insurance at some point.
Oh,
you can actually tell the insurance not to.
I didn't think about that.
No, that's a.
This is the dark side of digitalization, guys. Ooh. They'll know everything forever.
And if you want to become beamted, right?
Yeah, that part I don't know, but the pediatrician literally told me like she discourages parents to have that done for their kids.
But does she also prescribe chamomile tea for your child? like
it's
the best medicine.
She's like, don't do digital records, but do leeches. I will say though, a long time ago, I got misdiagnosed with scabies. I think it was scabies.
Isn't that like a pirate disease?
No, that's scurvy. Scabies are like, it's like a bed buggy kind of thing.
Okay.
But like, I just had like eczores. I don't know what I had, but like, I had atopic dermatitis. You know what? That's not the point of the story. The point is that like, I got misdiagnosed and then I went to a different dermatologist and he was like, that guy's an idiot. Do you want me to write a letter telling him that? And I was like, that doesn't seem like it's going to accomplish much. But in retrospect, I think it was so that my permanent records wouldn't be like, you're a dirty, scabies covered, uninsurable in the German healthcare system once it becomes a digitized person. So,
maybe,
yeah.
Anyway, should we move on?
Yes.
Around 1,800 people who came to Berlin as refugees from Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine have been threatened with deportation. These are people...
Okay, so earlier I did tell the audience that I didn't write about anything bad, but actually there are a few bad things. Sorry about that.
Yes, this is not one of those the weather's getting warmer kind of stories. These are people who do not have a Ukrainian passport, but were from third countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, Somalia, and so on. The risk is that they are then deported after losing their refugee status. Refugee status for Ukrainian citizens has been extended again for another year until March 2026. And there's an option for these 1,800 people to gain access to working visas or another type of visa. However, many people are not aware that this is a possibility. In order to qualify for a working visa, they'd have to have they'd have to show some form of integration, German skills, and prove they have no criminal record.
Yeah, and like anything here, it comes down to just some bureaucrat's coin flip.
Yeah, on the off chance there's one of these people listening to the podcast, who didn't know about this, maybe you did some good.
Yeah. Well, also we can maybe lend our support if we're not in that position. In sports news, the Berlin Thunder. Any fans here? No? Okay, that's one of our city's American football teams. They have a new home stadium. The demolition of their previous stadium, the Jan Sportpark in Pankau, drew the ire of the local community, not just because they were losing their beloved sports arena, but also because it was destroying habitat for sparrows and other birds, and especially at a time during nesting, nesting, breeding, and feeding could be a very bad thing. So that was spoken out against by not just the local community, but also the Environmental Association of the Naturfreunde Berlin.
I'm looking forward to all the German words you're going to have to read.
You know, it's not as bad as you believe. Now, the Thunder will now be playing alongside the un-American football club BFC Preußen in Lankwitz. By the way, they play in the American football in the ELF, which is the European League of Football, which is an incredibly confusing way to explain what they do. So they play American football in the ELF.
Elf.
Yes, European League of Football, where they play what is not considered football in Europe.
Do they have pointy shoes? Sorry, that's
Elf.
an elf
Because
joke.
of elf.
It's an elf
okay,
joke.
no,
Yeah.
no. That's
They're just
that's
not
my
landing.
fault. Anyway, so if you guys are curious to see how things are working out there, they open their season at home on May 18th against the Cologne Centurions. So
Oh my.
I don't know. I've never been to an American football game in Europe, and I'm kind of curious. Maybe we'll be there covering it live for release later. What else?
I mean,
is
one
going
thing that's really American is the names of these teams, right? They're nailing it.
Centurion.
Thunders, Tigers.
I feel like
I think Centurion is kind of like Italian. No?
Yes.
Originally.
Yeah. You're right.
I think Roman.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like the Romans were Italians.
I think maybe the other way around. I feel like Centurion is the name of a sports team in an American movie that couldn't afford to license a real sports team. You know, where they're like, Johnny Dangerous, who do you play? The Centurions. Wow, the best team in the Football League International.
Or the elf.
Yes. What else is going on?
Well, in sports adjacent news, the Greens have suggested that the memorial in Hasenheide Park should no longer be dedicated to gymnast Friedrich Ludwig Jahn. According to the Green Party spokesperson for women's policy in the Green parliamentary group, Baha Hagenpour, Friedrich Ludwig Jahn is celebrated as the father of gymnastics, but his nationalist, anti-Semitic and anti-feminist attitude is often concealed. An unveiling action is planned for International Women's Day, March 8th, to give attention to Neukölln gymnast Russell Persson, who is regarded as a pioneer in German women's sports and passed away in 2010.
And if you guys are trying to picture a memorial somewhere in Hasenheide, you know that sort of hill-ish thing that leads up to some rocks and stones where there's maybe a plaque that you've always been like, what's that? Well, it was this douchebag. Right. Toby, what else is going on?
In now unfortunately frequent tree removal news, and just up the street from where we are recording, a swath of large trees stretching down the block directly above U-Bahn station Gneisenau in Kreuzberg were recently chopped down. Renovations of the station, which include the addition of a much-needed elevator, have been going on for years. The construction also includes the replacement of water and gas pipes, and according to the BVG website, due to the location of the tunnel, it is necessary to cut down 18 partly diseased plane trees and lime trees between Zossener Straße and Mittenwalder Straße. And explain that planting of 23 new trees has been provided as compensation. Critics point out that 70 to 120-year-old trees are not simply replaced, that the shrubs removed were also breeding area for sparrows and other species. Additional criticism took the form of a stump spray-painted with an axe and the phrase, "Fuck the BVG."
Yeah, although I have to say, like, I live in this neighborhood, obviously, not obviously, but the missing trees did kind of make it open and light and feel. I love trees. The absence of them is also not that bad. Like, it did feel all of a sudden like I don't know, I was in a city or something, but like a nice part of one. I don't know how to explain this, but I feel like there was a way to do this the right way. Also, for longtime listeners, the intersection I've been complaining about is being incredibly dangerous with the trees on the corners. My one reason why I want to become a citizen is to stop this. It was one of those trees, but that one's still there. Yeah.
So 'tis the season of strikes, and all over the city, not an U-Bahn was running, nor nurses nursing. Verdi announced strikes earlier in the week, including nursing staff. At the same time, waste disposal workers also striking for high wages and better compensation for especially stressful work, like working in shifts. They're asking for an 8% pay rise, or at least €350 extra a month, and 3 more holiday days per year. They are, of course, procedures in place to make sure that emergency care work will still go forward. However, as with traditional health workers' strikes, this will lead to long patient backlogs and planned surgeries and backlogs for planned surgeries and problems with booking appointments due to patient backlog. Austerity has to bite the powers that be, though, in the butt, or they won't do anything to change it. So Radio Spaetkauf applauds the amazing work of everyone who sadly felt that they had to go on strike today and tomorrow to get better wages.
And anyone who's... Okay, yeah, sure, we can clap for that.
Okay.
I do think anyone who's been to, like, the Urban Krankenhaus emergency room assumed that they were already on strike, though. Like...
I had 2 babies there and I was very happy.
Oh, no, great place to have a baby.
Yeah.
No, for sure. The emergency room... You didn't do it in the emergency room, though.
I have been to the emergency room a few times.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Great care. So, just you, Dan.
Just short-staffed. That's all I meant. Moving on, Toby.
I think
It's
Miss
me.
Pip.
Yep.
Pip.
Yeah, I call her... It's a nickname I have.
Not many people know about it. Thank you. The 16,000 or so BVG workers will not strike again until the next round of talks with BVG are over after the 12th of March. BVG workers are trying to negotiate a better pay deal to make up for inflation increases in the last years that have undercut the value of their wages and were not adequately adjusted. A previous offer was made on the 26th of February to increase the shift allowance by 125% so that each shift would be compensated with €225. This would have been retroactively applied for the months of January 2025 onwards. Verdi is fighting, though, to increase the pay substantially for their workers and rejected this deal. Berlin either steps up and pays out, or we get another round of strikes in the second half of March.
Ahead of International Women's Day, it's worth telling a good Berlin story about how it's better to women than other German cities. The gender pay gap in Berlin is slightly lower than in the rest of Germany. Female Berliners earned a mere 10% less than male Berliners.
Woo!
That is, I guess, what we're clapping for. That is less than the national average that sees women paid around 16% less than men overall. I think that means that women would have to stop working sometime in early December to earn back the difference. In terms of care work across Germany, women do an extra 1.5 hours of care work than men. In Berlin, this number is just under an hour.
There we go.
Yeah.
Did you know that International Women's Day was actually invented by a Berliner as well, Clara Zetkin? She is one of the founders, or she was one of the founders of the KPD party in Germany, and founded the day during the International Socialist Women's Conference at the turn of the 20th century. There you go. Bit of trivia. So Berlin released some tourism data last week in time for the biggest tourism conference in the world, the ITB. And it turns out loads of people wanted to come to Berlin. Yay! 12.7 million people visited Berlin last year, staying for a total of 30 million nights. Stay. Yeah.
It's such a funny way to calculate it.
Yeah, I know, but this is how we calculate tourism numbers. So in Paris, I think it's something like 40 million nights stay. In London, it's like 35 million. So Berlin is like top three in Europe. Yeah. Here was a citation I thought I did for you, actually. Yeah. So Franziska Giffey, what a throwback. Yeah. Thank you. Throwback to 2023 there. Bit of booing. So she was delighted with these figures and said that there are so many more highlights in store for 2025 that will attract visitors to the city alongside Berlin's perennial favourites such as the innovative tech trade fair and NFL football matches. She goes to Elf.
No, she goes to Niffle. That's Elf is not Niffle. It's a completely different.
It's the American Football League.
I can't. I just can't imagine coming to Berlin for that. What a dumb idea. I mean, if anything, you're coming to Berlin to not go to American football, unless it's a really
she's
quirky
in Berlin
team.
all the time.
Yes, right.
So she's just visiting different parts of Berlin, and the Niffle, the Apple, and the football are things that she likes. Anyway.
Yeah, so the Berlinale happened, by the way.
Did anybody go to movies?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that was good. Roughly 20% of Berliners attended, according to our quick poll.
For a few weeks in February, the city went bonkers, and a bunch of celebrities made some news getting into Berghain, and some not, I presume. And some films got seen. Loads, in fact. And one called Dreams won. And Tilda Swinton was here and said some important things. And in the end, it was all fabulous. Sorry, I didn't go to it. Every time I mean to go and I never go.
This was the first year I didn't buy tickets, but last year I bought multiple tickets to like 5 or 6 movies and attended, I think, maybe none of them. I'm really ambitious. I'm like, I have lots of friends. I have lots of spare time. I'm going to see a lot of movies with a lot of people. And then it's just like, no, Dan, you're supporting the arts, which is, needs it more than ever.
So, welcome to the stage, Fabian Flus. Hello! Clappy, clappy. Fabian is part of the Bürgerinitiative A100, working to stop the extension of the A100 motorway through the district of Friedrichshain. The citizens' initiative has been running for many years, but 2025 is a decisive year for the campaign. So, to tell us more, here is Fabian. Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, you're welcome. So can you tell us what stage the A100 is currently at and what they plan to do if they have their plans realised, and what would it mean for Friedrichshain and South Neukölln?
So probably most of you know the A100. It's this motorway that's coming up from Neukölln, and currently they're building the second last phase officially of that motorway that runs from Neukölln to Treptower Park. So it's a gigantic construction project. It's the most expensive motorway Germany has ever built so far. And this motorway is supposed to be opened this summer. They haven't given us a date yet, but that means a lot of cars will be kind of spit out from the motorway into a part of the city that has no capacity to absorb them. So that's what's going to happen probably this summer, and it looks pretty difficult to stop that. And then they're also starting the plans to continue that motorway from Treptower Park all the way up to the northern part of Friedrichshain and Prenzlauer Berg to Storkower Straße. And this is an even bigger construction project that's even going to be more expensive, and it's going to destroy even more stuff. And that's why we formed a citizens initiative to stop that.
And how long has the citizens initiative been going on?
So the resistance against the motorway has been going on for many years, more than 15. There have been attempts to stop this part that they're constructing now, or they're finishing the construction of now. But more and more people are joining now because this last bit is so crazy and so insane that more and more people are getting active to stop the building of that last bit.
Because we said in the intro that it's going to be destroying some very famous techno clubs and some parts of Friedrichshain that we don't want to see destroyed. Can you explain more about that?
Yeah, so first they have to get across the Spree from Treptower Park, so there would be a giant motorway running alongside the park. There's currently not enough space in terms of bridges to cross it, so it's a bit unclear what would happen there.
Okay. That seems like the place where we'd want to make our stand.
Exactly.
Okay.
We just like stand there, just like
I don't know. I read a book about Romans once. Right? This is the Rubicon.
And so there are already 2 or 3 clubs.
Was it called Centurion?
So there's the Club Ost, one of the techno clubs. There's Renate, which might have to close down already this year because of conflicts with the owner. Then there is this Wagenplatz, the FIPS, which has been there for a long time, also a countercultural space that would be destroyed. And then they're about blank as well, before the motorway would go into a tunnel underneath the Ostkreuz. So they want to build a 2-level tunnel to get across the tracks, which is a totally insane building project. And the about blank, as far as I know, is even just meant to be a place for the cement mixers. So they would destroy the club so they have a parking ground for the cement mixers.
Oh my God, that's like an even more depressing Joni Mitchell song. It's like, it's not just like tear down Paradise, put up a parking lot. Tear down Paradise to put up a thing to make a parking lot. That is brutal.
That's the plan.
This is like, we've been covering this topic. Obviously, this has been going on for a long time. We've been covering this topic, I guess, as long as I've been doing this podcast almost. But like the A100 is like a thing you can drive on, right? But what I don't get about all the talk, I don't ever feel like I've hit a dead end on it. Like what? Like it's a thing we use. Like what happens when you get to the? Is this an incredibly stupid question? Because I keep picturing it. Like I think one of the things. Does this make sense? It's where does it end now?
Yeah. So they're building a new connection from Neukölln. So that's currently you have kind of a curve in Neukölln where you're on the A100.
Right.
And now there's going to be another option to go north all the way to Treptower Park. So currently you're just going on the motorway. You don't notice anything, but there will be a new, so kind of a Y-shaped connection to it.
Okay. So like where you, if you're like coming, like where you drop off into Neukölln now, instead of turning left towards on your way to Tegel or something.
Yeah.
You right? Is that
yeah? Or turning west, yeah.
Yeah, generally west. Yeah. It's the only thing I've ever gone to.
Not west at all.
You get there. It's like it's a road. Yeah. So one of the things that's always like, and again, after covering this is the first time I've managed to add to this in a decade of covering this, is sort of like I think the idea that you can stop it. You know, that it's not just going to be like a dead end, or like there isn't like a road that like falls off into nothing if we stop working on it, right? And there is sections of it that are built that are not being used yet, right? And what do we do with those?
So that's a really tricky one because they have been built 98%. What we are asking for, so there were ideas for what could be done with them, from like cycle path to like climbing walls, etc. That seems increasingly challenging.
Right. We covered it once, an idea of a vertical farm inside of it.
So what we are asking as the Citizens Initiative, but also in a wider coalition, is to downgrade this from a motorway to just a regular road. And then you could limit the traffic that's going on it, and you wouldn't have this gigantic traffic being kind of forced into the neighborhoods around Neukölln and Kreuzberg and Friedrichshain.
Yeah. What if we did just leave it like with a giant gap, and it was like that scene in Speed where they got to just jump off? All right. Anyway, Toby, I think you had a smart question.
I had like a devil's advocate kind of question. Like you're saying it's going to bring traffic into the city, but wouldn't it also draw traffic away from those tiny streets where people are driving from Neukölln to Treptow down like these little roads through the city? They could just go. Yeah.
So one thing that kind of traffic experts say that there will be a lot of induced traffic. Like when you build the roads, the traffic will come. So we expect there will be even more cars kind of going into the city or wanting to go into the city because there's now a faster way. There might be a little bit less traffic in some of the streets where the new motorway part would be, but then you would have even more traffic where it ends. So it's kind of a infinite problem that you just keep pushing it into other parts of the city. And the current, especially because the Elsenbrücke is being reconstructed at the moment, it has absolutely no capacity to take on the traffic that would exit the motorway there. So that's going to be really horrendous.
But if it was just like a big overhead thing that just went off a cliff, we'd eliminate a lot of cars in the first few days. I'm for opening the A100, just not completely.
So in terms of like political solutions, though, it is true that Die Linke just won the latest federal election in Berlin in the Zweitstimme, so meaning that this was the party that got the most votes in the city. It also won 4 direct mandates in the city. Will this have any effect on the plan, seeing as one of the direct mandates was won in Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg?
Yeah, so Die Linke is one of the 2 parties that has been consistently against the construction of the motorway. It's been Die Linke and the Greens that have opposed it. And the Social Democrats at the Berlin level also a few years ago took a decision to oppose the motorway. So in Berlin, we have a majority of parties in the Berlin Abgeordnetenhaus that are against the construction of the motorway. Unfortunately, it's the responsibility of the federal government. So it will be the new transport minister who will probably decide if the construction will go ahead. And that's an open question, what that's going to mean. So probably the Berlin city still has some opportunities to delay it, but in the end, the decision will have to be taken at the federal level. And until a few days ago, we thought this is going to be so expensive because they're currently saying for this very last bit, for those 4 kilometers, it's going to be more than €1 billion. And that's kind of old costs. They're doing a new calculation. Everyone thinks it's at least going to double in the planning phase. And then in the construction phase, it could potentially increase or double again. So we could be looking at €1 million per meter. And so until a few days ago, our best hope was there's just no money for it. But a new €500 billion infrastructure fund that was just agreed could be to the detriment of our struggle, actually.
I was just going to say, they just turned on the water taps, didn't they, in terms of money?
So, infrastructure sounds so good in the abstract.
Can we get a piece of that money somehow? Like, can we?
I also maybe can we just bid against these people? I bet I can get it done for 900,000.
Yeah, but make a construction company and then just do a really bad job.
Yeah, we'll take the money, blow it on whatever we want.
Berlin's really used to that. Actually.
Yeah, I feel like
we have like
right
a history of doing that.
Yeah,
did anyone see the 90s or anything?
Right. Yeah. What could be more subversive than starting a fraudulent construction company
and using public money?
Yeah.
But this year we did say it was a pivotal year for the campaign. Is there anything that you would advocate people to get involved with, or where can they find out more about the campaign, and what kind of key dates are you looking forward to?
Yeah, so this year we'll have, so maybe some people already heard about it the last 2 years, but this year will be probably the biggest party of a coalition of clubs, climate organization, environmental organization, neighborhood associations, so everyone who's struggling against the A100 on the 17th of May. And we'll have a kind of afternoon program for families where we'll take over the streets where the motorway is going to exit and turn them into play streets and a political demonstration. And then from the late afternoon, the clubs are going to take over, especially those that will be destroyed by the motorway. And there will be a big political demonstration and rave. And that's going to be the attempt to really bring a lot of actors together and form a coalition that can then stop the motorway. And then there will be a day when they're opening the motorway. We don't know which one that's going to be, but we will try to make sure that that's not going to be a happy opening either.
Okay. Be warned. Kai Wegner. My God.
Did you? You confused him with your own Kai. That's good.
Okay, so thank you very much, Fabian. Is there anything else you wanted to say? Sorry.
Yeah, follow the Wegbutton, A100 Wegbutton on Instagram. All the info will be there, and then there will be more opportunities to get involved for anyone who's interested.
Right.
Amazing.
And we can bring our kids out on the 17th to be human shields for the A100, right? So, I mean, metaphorically, in a beautiful playgroundy kind of way. Guys, big round of applause for our guests.
Radio Spaetkauf.
Okay, I'm going to do the ad read. Serious voice, read it right. Hi, guys. By the way, I appreciate everyone who donates to come to the show and subscribes and to the Steady and does one-time donations. It's been fantastic. But also, cybersecurity is the top concern for businesses, according to Vanta's recent State of Trust report. But whether you're a startup founder or an experienced security professional, Vanta is here to help. Businesses use Vanta to establish trust by automating compliance needs across over 35 frameworks like ISO 27001 and SOC 2, SOC 2. Centralized security workflows complete security questionnaires up to 5 times faster and proactively manage vendor risk. Join over 9,000 global companies like Flow Health, Synesthesia, and Alika Bank who use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Learn how to simplify trust management at vanta.com/Radio Spaetkauf. That's vanta.com/Radio Spaetkauf.
Radio Spaetkauf.
All right, so after an extremely bruising and difficult campaign, Germany voted in a new parliament on February 23rd, 2025. These elections were called back in November after the Freudian slip.
Let's leave that in.
Called back in November after the ruling coalition, at the time, SPD, Greens and FDP, or Ampel coalition, collapsed. Chancellor Scholz has been running a somewhat caretaker government since then and will continue to do so until coalition talks are finished and the new government has been sworn in.
The CDU won the election with 28.5% of the vote. AfD came second with 20% of the vote. SPD had their historically worst election outcome ever with 16.5% of the vote, followed by Greens with just over 11% and Die Linke with just under 9% of the vote. Two parties that did not make it into the parliament that were very close, though, were the FDP of Christian Lindner.
Woohoo!
Everyone's love to hate him fired finance minister, who was part of the previous Ampel coalition government. And
and lastly, the BSW, the party built around Sarah Wagenknecht, which splintered from Die Linke last year to pursue much more hardline policies on immigration and had overt support for Russia against Ukraine. For a full breakdown of this election, head over to our very good friends at Megan's Bank Account, who did an election breakdown on Tuesday after the vote, which was excellent and very funny.
Here in Berlin, the numbers were totally different. Berlin very much got the fucking memo and voted very convincingly against the increasingly fever-pitch anti-immigration and those of immigration background living here in Germany. Die Linke, the election winners at 19.9% of the vote overall. Die Linke were the election winners at 19.9% of the vote overall. The vote in Germany is broken down into two votes. The first vote where you are voting for a party, and the second where you're voting for an elected representative for your district or direct candidate. Die Linke won 4 direct candidates in the city, more than any other party. CDU won 3 direct candidates, the Greens won 3, SPD won 1, and the AfD also won 1. Looking at you, Marzahn. Die Linke made history as well by winning the Neukölln district and Kreuzberg. These districts belong to the former western part of the city, and it is the first time that a Linke candidate has won in a previously western district in the second vote. Die Linke came first in half of the city's voting districts, 6 out of 12. The CDU came first in 5 of them, and the AfD won in Marzahn. Die Linke won in places like Mitte and Pankow, as well as the districts where they won the direct candidates.
So this was a stunning turnaround for a party that many, including many people within the party, had written off at the end of last year, presuming that it would not be able to get over the 5% hurdle to make it in the Bundestag. This was because of the perceived strength of BSW and Die Linke's sometimes inconsistent messaging on major issues like the war in Ukraine and its position on Palestine and Israel, an increasingly extremely important issue to their voter base. The analysis is focusing on how Die Linke managed to profit a lot from CDU's flirtation with during the election campaign with working with the far right in Parliament. The CDU did attempt to pass an Orwellian immigration bill and a potentially illegal immigration bill through Parliament, and it was designed in a way that would have only passed with the AfD. In the end, it failed to pass, but Merz was rightly dragged through the press for having broken an 80 years precedent of mainstream parties refusing to work with the far right, breaking the so-called Brandmauer. After centre parties were upset about the Brandmauer, but only Die Linke was talking about immigration in a positive way and urging restraint when talking about punishing whole communities for the actions of one person. For many, it was felt that they were the only party speaking out against a dangerous slide towards fascism, and so many on the left lent them their votes rather than voting for the SPD and the Greens.
You have to keep going, Izzy.
I think it was interesting too. It wasn't just about party messaging, but individual candidates. And I think, like, one of the things to keep in mind whenever you're looking at elections in this country is, like, when it comes to a national party and then the opinions of any individual candidate in any individual district, there can actually be a difference. Like in the country I come from, the party has opinions, and it is down the line everyone's opinions. And here you have these deviations at the national, the state, or individual levels where you might just have like totally reasonable candidates running, and it's sort of worth talking to or finding out what they think. And some of them are beyond reasonable. Some are actually kind of cool. For instance, in Neukölln, where you vote or could vote.
Yeah, so I mean, Neukölln voted in Ferhat Kocek with the first vote. So he was the direct candidate, and he won over 30% of the vote, which is really, really, really high. So it was double the next candidate. And what was really stunning about this was, yes, it's the first time that a Die Linke candidate has won in Neukölln. And the district has been a voting district for 75 years, as the SPD candidate kept on telling people on like the last day of voting. He was like, they haven't won in 75 years. Don't vote for them now. So yeah, but they did. And they employed a very novel, well, not really novel, but it's kind of going back to basics in terms of campaign strategy, which I found really interesting to sort of watch play out in my neighborhood. So they really mobilized their members. Die Linke sort of pushing at the boundary of now 100,000 members. They managed to mobilize tens of thousands of people in the last couple of months. They mobilized a lot of people after Merz's little dance with the far right back in February. But yeah, they had something like 1,000 people come to the district of Neukölln, a voting district of 81, in order to do an action week as well, where they went and knocked on many doors. So the aim was to go over 50,000 doors. In the end, they knocked on over 70,000 doors and had over 30,000 discussions with people. And they also really went into the neighborhood and tried to listen to the concerns of people. They hosted a winter fest. So they had a little festival that felt like a little Christmas market. And you could go there and play games and also talk to your local candidate, Ferhat Kocek, about the issues and concerns in your neighborhood. They've been doing a lot of mobilization inside of Neukölln for a while, but this was really mobilization with a huge amount of members involved as well. So it's based on a theory of change, or based on another campaign that they did successfully in Leipzig last year in September, where the candidate in Leipzig won over 40% of the vote as a direct mandate, a direct candidate, and they just basically repeated that. And now it seems like that's how they win in these districts. I mean, there's part of a theory of change where they basically are saying, you know, they're talking to a lot of AfD voters, and the AfD voters often in the East are saying, well, you don't come and talk to me, so why would I vote for you? The AfD at least comes to my door and talks to me and listens to my concerns. So Die Linke is now employing this strategy, or they hope to employ this strategy, and their aim now over the next 5 years, now that they have 9%, they got their funding back, Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung isn't going to shut down. You know, all of these things have huge consequences. And their aim now is to win back the East. Well, that's their stated goal.
And I mean, he's also like a kind of a remarkable figure to put in the front of this, as like we covered a long time ago. He was someone who received like threats and like basically being attacked by, you know, the NSU 2.0, those you know, the sort of the Nazi part of Neukölln that we forget about sometimes.
Yeah, I think his house was set on fire.
Yeah. So I think it's not also it's not a coincidence that is he becomes a popular candidate.
Yeah.
In terms of turnout, this was the highest in recent history. Across the country, 84% of those eligible voted, showing how engaged people were and how important people felt it was to vote. In Berlin, we also had over 80% voter participation, one of the highest on record. Give me a cheer if you voted. All right, that sounds like less than 80%, but well, maybe not all of you were allowed to vote.
Give it a cheer if you can vote.
That's less people.
Give it.
More people voted than were allowed.
Give it if you
Voter
give
fraud.
it if you can't vote.
This is getting less and less scientific as we go. Oh man.
So this is.
You think no? What is voting?
Yeah, so this is the thing, that the percentage of people who live in Berlin and are able to vote is actually going down with every election cycle. Of the people that live in the city, under 2/3 of them have the right to vote, 63%. This is down from 73% 20 years ago. And this number includes people who are too young to vote and people who, for whatever reason, have had their vote taken away from them. But by far the biggest group of people unable to vote are those without German citizenship. This number has grown by nearly 200,000 since the last election. This year, 965,000, almost 965,000 of voting age living in the city were not able to vote because they lack citizenship. This is up from 790,000 in 2021. This is something that numerous campaigns have tried to raise awareness for in the last half decade or so. Most successfully, I think, by the Deutsche Wohnen Enteignen campaign that made it part of their signature collection strategy to get as many people to sign that could, but were not actually allowed to, in order to show how high this number was. It does beg the question, though, how democratic is it to have over a third of our citizens in the city living, working, paying taxes, sending kids to local schools and using public services who are unable to have a say in how the government is run? Dan.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I object to the use of beg the question there as someone who has 2/3 of a philosophy degree. It does lead to that question rather than beg it. But it's funny. Like, as an American, you grow up being taught that we fought for like our independence because of taxation without representation, and I was like, well, that sounds sure, whatever. And then one day a few years ago, I was like, wait, that's me, and I am angry. I was like, I kind of get it now. And I mean, not that I really pay much in taxes, but
you will do after that ad.
The point is, oh, yeah, that's right. Great, now another fucking thing I got to edit out. I do also think, though, what is interesting about it is it doesn't just weaken my ability to interact democratically, but in a sense changes the value of other people's votes. In that, if you're someone who aligns with me and I am not allowed to vote, that your vote is also worth less than one person's vote. So, and that the city is distributing income and making decisions based upon a population that's bigger than the people who are interacting with it democratically. So it's not just a matter of me not being represented, but also you, the listener, not being represented in the same way. And I think that you see that a lot with disenfranchisement of any population, that it doesn't just affect them. Does that make sense, or did everyone already know that?
I think it makes sense.
Okay.
I think I know what you're saying.
I just think that the effect of canceling those votes isn't just on those people, and it's bad for everyone. Right. And I don't want to vote in the national election, just like my neighborhood.
But you can do that, right?
No, I can't.
No? Okay.
Some European citizens can vote in like this tiny little, what is
EU
it? The which
Keats.
one?
Yeah.
Bit-sex parliament.
Oh,
That's all I want.
God. Thank you, Fabian.
I don't
I'm
know
not
they
an
have
idiot.
that much power.
I know, but that's all I'm asking for. I mean, I'm used to my vote in the national election meaning nothing anyway. So, like, that's the democracy I grew up with. Our next guest is a researcher from King's College University of Cambridge and the winner of a 2023 Nine Dots Prize, based here in Berlin. Her work focuses on urban land, housing crisis, and the progressive potential of the law. Listeners may be familiar with her voice as one of the spokespeople for Deutsche Wohnen Enteignen, and in 2024, she published a wonderful book titled Radically Legal, Berlin Constitutes the Future. Please, a warm Radio Spaetkauf welcome to Joanna Kusiak. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today. Could we maybe open with a reading from the book to let people kind of jump in?
Of course.
All right.
So I start with a short fragment that is about me being in a court with my landlord, which I guess is the experience of many Berliners. And that's how I was also politicized to a housing struggle in Berlin. Because Herr Meyer was yelling, I couldn't understand his exact words. Frau Tams, on the other hand, was speaking with soft confidence, folding words I understood perfectly into sentences that sounded baroquely mysterious. But sometimes we get to feel the implications of what is happening long before we grasp it in words. That scorching summer, in a cool chamber of administrative court in Berlin Mitte, Herr Meyer and I had both arrived at the same truth, one that neither of us had really felt before, that I, too, was free. A student from Poland is not going to tell me what I can or cannot do with my property, Herr Meyer had told me a few weeks earlier. I had challenged his rent increase, and he had threatened to terminate my contract. When I saw him at his office, with an oil-on-canvas painting of a red sports car right behind his head, I sensed that he took his power advantage for granted. Now, in court, his face was contorted in a furious grimace. I had written my master thesis on Walter Benjamin and Herr Meyer's apartment, and suddenly it occurred to me that my landlord must be experiencing what Benjamin called the mythical violence of the law. In his defense, he kept repeating the word Eigentümer, owner. Herr Meyer was the owner. And who was I? Amid the strange music of German legal jargon, I felt the mythical violence of the law burning new pathways through my identity. It was as if Frau Tams, a lawyer from the Berlin Tenants Association, were casting spells on me. With her first spell, she turned a poor student into a legal subject. With her second spell, she turned a Polish migrant into a rightful Berliner. For her third spell, Frau Tams said nothing. She left me in a space where I could turn myself into whatever I wanted to be, because I was free. That scorching summer, the law completed in me a new notion of freedom. After years of just being free to go, Berlin had made me free to stay.
Nice. You do a great job. I a lot of times academics come on the show and the books can be a bit of a slog, but you do a great way of like wrapping in personal narrative and references to both the history and like a future and literary references in a way that's it's a fun read. Which, by the way, guys, you can get the PDF for free. No, it's not. I said that like it was like that was your intention.
It's open access.
Yeah, it's open access. So
it's commons.
It's fun to read in. If you can also get a physical copy and pay money for it, which is a great way to go as well. There's a rhetorical question in your book that you ask of yourself. What does it mean to be radically democratic? Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about the answer that we find in there?
Well, I think to me, to be radically democratic means to be willing to work with people that we otherwise may disagree with. And I mean, the book is about my experience as a Berliner with the housing movement, but also me being a scholar activist, working with Deutsche Wohnen and Co. Enteignen. I mean, to be a scholar activist means that on the one hand, I research for the movement. On the other hand, I research with and on the movement. So basically, in Berlin terms, I mean, I'm trying not to be a researcher that is a parasite that comes to the movement and just, takes the knowledge and sells it, but also returns something and put my energy also.
An embedded social
for the cause of the movement. And I got engaged with Deutsche Wohnen and Eignen because I still find it one of the most impressive political initiatives in Germany, maybe in Europe. And one of the reasons being it's one of the initiatives that really managed to work with people across political differences. I mean, the 60% of people who voted yes in a referendum, they couldn't be just lefties from Kreuzberg and Neukölln. That just wouldn't make the stats.
Right. Why do you think it worked across? In many ways, it's a very progressive policy. People who have otherwise maybe regressive views, why did they go along with the Enteignen?
Well, I mean, I think that there are many reasons. I mean, one being, of course, housing crisis affects everyone. And I think, the housing crisis doesn't choose if you're left or right. I mean, the people across all political views, they have problems now because the rent is rising and they fear that they will be expelled. But also we keep forgetting that these political identities are not something fixed or given, and it is often a matter of speaking to people. And you were talking about Die Linke now doing also the work of actually going and speaking to people and doing door-to-door campaign. I mean, that's what Deutsche Wohnen and Co. Enteignen have been doing in their own campaign, and really listening to people and not assuming that if someone disagrees or even say something that is unacceptable on the surface, that means that we have to already assign, certain identity to this person and define them as friend or enemy and forget about it. I mean, the movement has an impressive ability to work with anger, and no political party but AfD is able to see and address anger. And that's, of course, dangerous because this anger is there. And the question is, who's going to take it over?
So you're saying that it's dangerous that only one person is identifying and working with anger, or are you saying that anger is inherently dangerous?
No.
Okay.
I think anger is part of life, and by all means, people have hell lot of good reasons to be angry in Berlin, and people have been angry, because of the housing crisis, because of many other reasons. The problem is that most of the mainstream political parties, they don't want to work with anger. They rather suppress it. They tell people they shouldn't be angry. They look down at them because they're not rational. I mean, how dare? And you're not pretty also when you're angry. And what is that, right? I mean, and this anger doesn't go. I mean, the more it gets suppressed, then it turns into, what psychologists call the free-floating rage, where it doesn't matter anymore. And then you're really willing to throw this anger at anything. And there comes the AfD, for example, that tells, well, let's find migrants or whoever to throw this anger. But then there's a late stage. And I think what Deutsche Wohnen and Enteignen achieve is to really take this anger and, by a mixture of alchemy, that is hard political work, turn it into a joy and a very actually pro-systemic project of reinventing the housing system and mobilizing the constitution.
It didn't feel like an angry campaign.
Exactly.
At all. And I mean, was that a lost opportunity? Could it have been 70% if there'd been maybe like the Deutschen Wohnung youth wing or something?
Well, I think like one of the chief things is like when a movement manages, sorry, I'm just totally butting into it, but I just had an idea. But when a movement manages to capture anger and offer a solution, then you turn anger into hope, and hope is the most powerful thing to get people on the streets and to get people voting.
Is that a fact?
Ask Obama.
Well, yeah. So not unlike Obama, Deutsche Wohnen and Enteignen didn't really manifest all the promises or the dreams that we had hoped for in the end. There's a great section in your book where you kind of compare the corporate forces that are aligned against the people to like the Jabberwocky creature of Lewis Carroll, and you say something like, "We didn't need to smash the system, only to save our system from being smashed by the inhumane power of the corporate Jabberwock," which is great. You go on to say, if the solution was hiding, it was hiding in plain sight. Right at the heart of the Grundgesetz there lay a Vorpal sword, Article 15. So that was what the Deutsche Wohnen and Enteignen seized upon, was this sword, and this is how we were going to slay the Jabberwock. But was it the wrong sword, or like what happened and what's next?
I think it was the wrong mayor and not the wrong sword. Coming back to Franziska Giffey. No, I mean, the problem is, look, I mean, the question of political activism, right? Like you can perceive Deutsche Wohnen and Enteignen as a anti-systemic initiative. You can perceive that there's a pro-systemic initiative. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, they refer to the German constitution. I mean, in a way, what's more conservative, right? And then they're not trying to smash the system. They're trying to save the housing system that has been progressively dismantled by the domination of the big corporation. Now, we won with 60%, so this should have been implemented, but it was not implemented because the government is very much in the pockets of the big real estate companies, right? What is happening, the hope is not all gone. What is currently happening in the movement is that, 2 years after the referendum that wasn't implemented, the movement crowdfunded money and hired a law firm to write the legislation, and there is plans for another referendum that will be a legislative referendum, which means that if we were to win this one, it would be automatically implemented. But that's a long process. So in a way, the whole game will be starting anew, because clearly one cannot count on the government to do their job of implementing the results of the referendum. So that's still happening. But when it comes to Jabberwock and a corporation, I compare corporation to Jabberwock, which is a fictional creature that is made only of the nonsense words. It comes from the poem of Lewis Carroll. Because corporation is technically a legal fiction. And the biggest part of this fiction is that it gets a right of a person, like a right to property and a whole lot of other rights. Now, the other thing is that rights in general are also fictions.
Okay, good, yeah.
So there's a lot of fictions, in politics, and that's good and bad. It depends, the questions which of those fictions get empowered. We have a lot of rights in the Constitution, but it doesn't mean that they're really enforced or implemented, right?
Right.
So a right is a certain fictional aspiration, let's put it like that can only be empowered through politics. And through this mass mobilization. And at the same time, a corporation is also a fictional persona, basically a bunch of contracts that is, however, empowered by the big capital that is making political decisions. And so I think the brilliant move on the side of DWE was to leverage the power of the strongest legal document in the country, namely the Constitution. And I think, so when I was having a temporary gig as one of the spokesperson of the campaigns, I was mostly responsible for international media, and there was massive, massive interest from all over the world.
Right.
And rightly so, because in a way it goes to the heart of global capitalism. You have a neighborhood-based initiative that uses national law to tackle global capital. And the question that emerges out of it, is it still possible for democracy to win with global capital, is really an open question. I don't know.
It seems to be no.
Yeah, it seems to be no, but if we agree, then it's no, that's the end of democracy. So it's really the battle.
Right. But in the end, yeah, you turn on and say, anybody?
Anyone want to solve capitalism right now?
I feel
if
like
that's not a call to action, I don't know what is.
Well, yeah, but a call to action is usually, in the parlance we live with today, click this link. Follow, smash the system / Radio Spaetkauf. But for all of us that are, for me, I'm feeling like the lyrics of the punk bands I listened to as a teenager are just starting to make, they make sense now. I was like, at the time I was like, guys, it's a good song, but come on, Propaganda, turn it down, you're Canadian. Thank you. But now, and also as someone who's inured in the system, as like a middle-aged person with children and like a podcast to protect, what do I do? How do I act? What's anti-fascism, or how do I go about, if not smashing the system, smashing the politicians who are belabored, not literally to this lobby or whatever? How do we go forward?
Well, I think the tricky part is really to try to use any kind of power that we have. And if it's the unusual move, right, of the very leftist initiative to call on the law and the Constitution, it is because in a situation where the power relations are very unequal already, it is just stupid to give up any sort of power that we can use, and law and state structure seems to be that power, and it was actually formally designed for us. I also got my citizenship in 2020, so I can
Congrats.
say I'm not just Polish now, I'm German too. So we are citizen, and that means actually, that there's a whole lot of interesting things written in the Constitution.
I haven't read it myself.
Yeah, it's actually a very decent Constitution.
No, it's fresh. It's new. Like the one in my country's super. Like it was first to market. It's got but it's old. You guys made yours. I'm not. Yeah, you got your German now. I mean, the German Constitution. And it's like way better.
Well, I think it is, but on a more serious note, I don't think it's better because it's new, but it's better because it was written in 1945.
Yes,
and because there was a very, very vivid awareness of how wrong it can get.
Yeah,
and that vulnerability, that going really down to the human core. Contributed to the fact that it was also CDU and SPD that were both proactively working towards putting the Article 15 into the Constitution.
Interesting.
And the history of this article, Article 15 is the socialization of Vergesellschaftung, it's the clause that DWE was using, the discussion very much in the council that wrote the Constitution was about, listen to it, because today it's much more interesting, how big business, can become a threat to democracy.
Yeah.
And of course, you don't need to explain today in the age of Elon Musk that big business can become threat to democracy.
Right.
And they predicted it in 1945 based on a very national economy, remembering how big industry helped Hitler in going to power.
And just following the war I happen to have be doing another podcast on demography. Anyway, the point is, when they polled people post-war and tried to get to the German attitudes towards democracy and free thinking, where they found the most resistance to becoming democratic or democratic ideals was in business owners, factory owners, people who benefited directly. And whose power was going to be decreased going forward. People who had free labor, who had whatever, like those people were really resistant, and they were also, they wanted a patriarchal side. They wanted their power and all of these things. So, I think they weren't just predicting the future. But that being said, when you look at Article 15, it's not very specific, right? It's really sort of describing a vibe.
Well, it's actually from a legal point of view, it's very innovative because it's also the only article in the Constitution that is a collective right and not individual right. So it also contains this idea that freedom is also something that we work out together. That is not just, for me or for you, and we're not just individuals, we're also a community. And that's very unusual for any constitutions. So that's, it's a gem. And it's interesting. Again, you mentioned before that SPD got historically the worst result. By all means, I think they deserve it. Because if you think about the party who was, now they were the really driving force behind Article 15 together with the Communist Party. And if they were any politically smart, they'll be capitalizing on it. They'll be saying, look, we invented it. We're going to save the housing crisis. And everyone will know it's thanks to the SPD who already in 1945 figured that out. They could really, make tons and tons of political capital on it. But, of course, they don't. They're too invested with the real estate business to care about their own political program in the meantime.
You mentioned that it affects everyone, and we sort of this assumption that it's people who are struggling financially or in the middle classes that are going to be in favor of rent control and these things like that. But we also found out in the recent election that a lot of off-day voters are higher income or wealthier or coming from wealthier areas. So is there a disconnect in what you're seeing in terms of reaching across the aisle, or I guess it's not really an aisle here because it's a more the dance floor, to reach those voters? What is the appeal to Deutsche Wohnen und Tegnen's platform to people from the right who do have more money?
Well, you see, I think maybe the dance floor is the way to go because sometimes in politics people talk too much, and if they talk too much, they assume certain differences that might not be there if they dance together. I'm very serious about it. Because what's underneath all that are these emotions, fear and anger. And it's not just AfD voters that are fearful and they're angry. Just people are fearful and angry because, their home is costing more and more. There's inflation. There's stability. There's a threat of losing status. and to deal with those emotions. I mean, these emotions manifest very simply as tensions in the body. And these tensions need to be managed. And they are managed by either like relieving the cause, like maybe you don't need to fear anymore because, let's say, this housing is affordable. Or by the releasing the tension, also in the form of violence. I mean, sex and violence are a great way of relieving the tension of your body. I mean, that is, I mean, how
Sure, or laughter.
or laughter. Laughter too. That's how it physiologically works. And so, I mean, the message is secondary. I mean, lots of neuroscience research show that people, in the brains, they first make a decision and then they rationalize it. And so it is sometimes the question, will be the Linke politician or the AfD politician who first knock to the door. And it's important, it's not even so much what they say, it's about would they really show real human interest in me as a human being.
Right.
And that's really what it breaks down to. And this is what politics has long forgotten. It's just a business of people seeing other people. And people feel terribly, terribly unseen.
Can I ask a personal question? Because that's where I sense like my personal agency coming in, because I'm really afraid of my landlord. So I'm curious what happened with that case.
Well, I won 4 times. I'm still living in the apartment. So that's it.
Yeah.
Thanks to Berliner Mietergemeinschaft, indeed, and the lawyer I mentioned in the book. And that politicized me, and that was one of the reasons I later joined Deutsche Wohnen and Co-Enteignen, because I want this freedom also for others. So it is possible, and in a way, I mean, Berlin taught me, right? I mean, back then, as a indeed Polish student migrant with not much income, that I can have rights. And these rights matter and can mean something, and that was a great political empowerment for me.
I think chapter 4 or 5, we start talking about in your book about the future. Is there something could we read a passage that gives us maybe some of your thoughts of what we're going to be heading, where we're heading?
Sure, I speculate because another thing I think just to provide context for this passage is that another very smart political way of dealing, I mean, that the Deutsche Wohnen Enteignen came up with is to wrap a positive campaign in a negative campaign. I mean, the campaign is called Expropriate Deutsche Wohnen, so it's about, like down with these bad corporations, and you mobilize all the anger and negative potential. Right. But actually, what they do, I mean, secretly behind the scene, is write a very complicated law about how a new German institution for housing could look like, right? I mean, and how we could organize it, and how it with checks and balances and different committees and subcommittees. I mean, it's a German initiative after all, right? I mean, so the different working group. I mean, so AUR, Anstalt Öffentliche Recht. So, I mean, one of the slogans also I come up in the book is, to change arm aber sexy into AUR aber sexy. Anstalt Öffentliche Recht is the sexiest thing this initiative can imagine. And by all means, it is sexy because it will provide a new way of managing this housing so that indeed we can all
have sex.
No, because we'll no longer have the tension. It's going to kill the birth rate. Okay, I
will read the sex fragment now. Okay,
that's where we're getting to.
Yes. So you're saying that it's a dialogue. It's a dialogue actually between me, my daughter, and a doula who helped me give birth to my daughter 7 years ago, and who happens to also be an activist. So you're saying that democracy is kind of like Berlin's sex-positive parties. I smile, trying to visualize this metaphor. Well, to make either of them work, you have to stick to the same 3 basic rules. The first is that you have to create a space where everyone feels welcome just for who they are. Mira, my daughter, interrupts. Well, the second rule is probably that you have to have rules. Mom always says that. It seems not all of my efforts at parenting were wasted. Some basic rules allow people to seek their freedom without hurting each other. Okay, I think I know what's the third. I smile at Jem. We've been talking about it in DVE since the very beginning. What is it? Well, protesting against what you don't want isn't enough. With democracy, As with sex, you also have to allow yourself to say what you do want. You might need to negotiate with others to see if they want it too, but until you say your wishes out loud, you will never know.
Nice. I mean, increasingly, like, we're in a political environment where I'm not that guy or those people becomes a platform for a lot of parties, and it's not proving to be 100% successful. At the same time, I think it's interesting that you point to picking a villain, the Deutsche Wohnen and Co., and finding them and saying we're fighting against something. So, is there a difference between picking an enemy to mobilize people, or vilifying a group or a corporation in a way that's going to motivate people that's different than just saying we're not that person?
I think in comedy they call it punching up.
Well, no, it doesn't. But it doesn't always work, because you can be punching up at a billionaire or trillionaire or whatever, and people still won't vote for you. I think the question I'm trying to ask is, how do you harness anger and direct it for political thing without just being we're against this or that person?
Well, you have to, I mean, there's this alchemy indeed of turning it into joy. And that's, again, political work, and that's emotional labor, and that happens in person. I mean, it's very embodied also. It's a political movement that cannot occur only on social media and on Twitter. And it was interesting because, again, I mean, it is a very German movement that has a lot of working groups. And there was this, and I think that's where the strength also of Berlin as this place of German and non-German cultures came through, because on the one hand you had this very serious, and actually by and large mostly German people working on writing the law and reading the legal clauses, and then you have especially the group called Right to the City with all the international activists and saying, yeah, but we have to have a cheerleading team, and also, you know, we have to read a poem before our work meetings just for the vibe. And, you know, at first you should see the faces of some of those Germans, but you do need both. I mean, then you do need you know, these are just different types of works. It's not the cheerleading team is a leisure and writing the law is work. This is just different type of political work. One is aiming at the political legal strategy, and one is aiming at creating community. And it's this feeling of community that carries the movement now over 7 years, despite the fact the results of the referendum were not implemented, where there would be many reasons to just get tired and say, like, we've been working for free so long, but this feeling of community and the joy that it generates and the sense of belonging, I mean, that's what carries the movement forward.
Yeah, and I think it's also something that finds a place for a lot of people to join it, because I can't read the German Constitution, but I did help produce a podcast for the Deutsche Wohnen, and so I think it's sort of like, I think there's a hope in that too, when you see people like, oh, that's a person who can't vote and doesn't understand the world also being a part of this. I can be a part of it too. So I will include links to your book, the PDF, and the physical copies. Is there anything else people should know to continue or to reach out?
I mean, spread the word. The book's for free. I mean, you can buy a physical copy, but the digital is for free. There's also an audiobook that I recorded.
Oh, yeah.
So you can listen to it as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
Thank you.
Radio Spaetkauf.
All right, let's wrap this one up. This has been a lot. We have been
in
going
English.
for a while. Pip, anything to plug?
Thank you. I would like to plug, if anyone who just heard of our podcast, History Flakes, would like to come, we're doing a live recording on the 29th of March at the Comedy Cafe. It'll be a good laugh. We've been working on a series about the war. Sorry. You have to say it like that. But we're going to make it kind of slightly lighter by talking about spies.
Oh, everyone loves spies.
Yeah, who doesn't?
Wonderful. And that's History Flakes, like corn flakes, just in case
Exactly.
anyone.
Yeah.
But the link to the show, to the podcast, and to buy tickets for the live recording on 29th of March will be in the show notes. Toby?
I host a English comedy show every Tuesday at a place called The Harp on Oranienplatz 15 in Kreuzberg. Come by, entry is free, and you get to share your funny, weird Berlin stories, and we do a bit of comedy about that.
Yeah, it's
Dan
a lot of
is there
fun.
sometimes.
I'm there, yeah,
Quite
once
a lot,
month or so. Izzy?
So I am doing a tour of the Gleisdreieck Park on the 12th of April. So you can buy tickets for that on the Berliner magazine website. The Berliner is coming out, I think, next week, and they'll have a short section on it. But the tour is going to be about the making of the park, and it's kind of a how to build this sort of quite utopic park in the city centre, and how it could never have happened if it hadn't been for the location it was, and the history of Berlin and the Berlin Wall and the destruction during the Second World War and all of that stuff, and how they managed to turn it into a park after 50 years of Bürgerinitiative stopping motorways and stopping them chopping down trees and stopping them turning it into a car park and all of that stuff. So it's a really amazing story, and come join me on the 12th of April to hear a positive story about not building motorways.
Yes, tear down the parking lot, put up a paradise. You can come out and see me. I have shows every so often, and I might post them on the internet or something. If not, just Google it. I have nothing else to plug except for the fact that we'll be back here again on April 3rd in this cozy little used bookstore basement in 1 month's time from now, plus adding a few little shows here and there. Radio Spaetkauf is what you're already listening to. Weird plug to end the show with. Thank you to a round of applause for all our guests that we've had tonight, for our co-hosts, Biff and Toby and me. And now we'll just end the show.
Radio Spaetkauf. Berlin news in English.